Hello, Professor. My name is Ziza Zinchak, and this is my final for my U.S. history class. Alright, so I decided to do my project on the horseshoe because it's the heart of where it all began. So back when the University of South Carolina first opened in 1801, it was called South Carolina College. And the horseshoe was the center of it all. It originally had 12 buildings and it was laid out in a U shape, and that's how it got its name, the horseshoe. These buildings were used for a lot of things, such as like classes and housing and a lot of other things. But today, the horseshoe is one of the most loved places on campus, as it's very peaceful, has tons of green space and trees, and it's surrounded by beautiful historic buildings. It's amazing to think about how much history has happened here. One piece of history that I think is important to highlight is the inclusion of slaves on campus. In Lecture 20, made July 22nd, we talked about how, by the mid-1800s, slavery and cotton were at the heart of the U.S. economy, especially in the South. South Carolina had the highest number of enslaved people, with two main groups, plantation slaves and urban slaves. Since Columbia didn't have big plantations, urban slavery was more common there. South Carolina had urban slaves, and they were used as workers in the cafeteria, to do manual labor, assist in labs, etc. Many slaves in Columbia were actually able to read and write, and some even taught others. Even though there were efforts to keep black people apart, enslaved and free black people stuck together and built a strong, vibrant community in the city. This was evident in Urban Slavery in Columbia, paragraph 3. Also in Lecture 20, made on July 22nd, we looked at a receipt showing that enslaved people were used to help build a horseshoe. That really stuck with me, so I did a little bit more digging and actually found another receipt tied to the original brickwork. It mentioned that around 500 bricks were laid in just under 2 days, specifically 1 3/4 days. It doesn't explain exactly how the work was done or who did it, but given the time period, I think it's pretty clear that enslaved labor was involved. What really caught my eye, though, was the charge on the receipt. It says, college servant shoes, costing $2. That made me think about what we discussed in class, how enslaved people were sometimes given small things like shoes or maybe a day off on Sunday to motivate them to work harder. It's a tactic known as carrot sticking, using rewards to control behavior while keeping people in an oppressive system. I think it's so cool that we go to a college that has such a deep history, and I think sometimes we don't even notice it. Even myself, I've walked in the horseshoe numerous times. I've sat and ate lunch there and talked with my friends there, but I never actually sat and looked at the brick. Here I have a picture of the original brick, which I think is so cool compared to the newer brick. I think the older brick has a lot more character. On campus, there is one more slave quarter left, and it is located behind the president's house. This picture is from the University of South Carolina archives. You can find it in the library or on the library website, but it shows what the slave quarters used to look like. From my research, I knew that the slave quarter was on the southeast side of the president's house, so I went back there and tried to take some pictures as best as I could. This is a picture of what it looks like now, but just from a different angle. There was no way for me to get back there. It was completely fenced off, and they had padlocks on all of the gates. And this was the view from over the fence. While I was taking pictures, I met this wonderful lady, and I explained to her the premise of my project and what I was doing, and she allowed me to see the garden space where they hold like garden parties in the president's house, which I thought was pretty cool. After I left, I went to the library and did a deep dive into the archives of the slave quarters, and I couldn't find any pictures of the inside, which I thought was pretty interesting. One of the questions that I had when I was doing research was, why is this the only slave quarter left on campus? And through my research, I figured out that the only reason that this specific building is still in place was that it was used as storage. It's sad to think about such a historical building used as a storage closet, but it also shows how people back then viewed people of color, how they were less than, and how something like that is of no importance to preserve. In Lecture 21, we discussed how slavery was abolished in early December 1865. Shortly after that, in 1873, the first African American enrolled in South Carolina College. His name was Henry E. Hayne. Haynes' decision was very powerful and took a lot of strength because just decades earlier, enslaved people were being forced to work on the South Carolina College's campus. But now, when he went to school, African Americans were choosing to be there, and they were there as scholars, not slaves. In Frederick Douglass's 4th of July speech in 1852, it was said that this 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. That quote really stuck with me, and it made me think about how far we've come, not only as people of color, but as a society, and how incredibly brave those first Black students must have been to step into a place that once denied them and their ancestors everything.